I think it's more of a 2025 plan for this team, and that of course could be expedited if someone like Donovan Mitchell asks out this summer, which for the record I would predict happens this summer.
Gets it off in time, and he's got it, baby! Big time Nets win!
Oof, the only Net fans you know? The only Nets fans you know? Man. I mean, come on, man. Or are these guys?
Welcome back to the NetsFansYouKnowPodcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to a special episode of the show. Nets hiring Jordi Fernandez. I got another special guest. Joining me today is Billy Rienhardt. How's it going, bro? Big fan of your work.
Appreciate it, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've been following the team for a while, right?
I think the first year that I was credentialed covering the team was Brook Lopez's last year. So I think that was 2017. So it's been a little while. I haven't been credentialed the last couple of years. Was in law school and going down that path. So, but still following the team regularly. And you see me on Twitter and all that. So still trying to provide content and love covering the Nets.
As the news broke, Nets hiring Jordi Fernandez, I was totally shocked. I told my friends, go to these betting websites, put a bet on Bud. Bud is going to be the coach. I know for a fact that Joe Tsai went to Texas in the last 2 weeks to talk to Bud. I got that from a direct source. I would have bet my house on it. I was that confident. So when I'm checking my phone, as a matter of fact, I was on the phone with one of my sources, and literally, I don't know, maybe an hour after I'm off the phone with him, Nets hired Jordi Fernandez. I was just totally shocked. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we got hit with that notification pretty late at night. I think it was 11, 12 o'clock at night. And I was surprised. I definitely thought Bud was the favorite. However, we got the report, I think a day or two prior, that Jordi Fernandez was among the final 3 finalists for the job. So we knew he was a possibility. Obviously, any NBA fan, they don't know that much about assistant coaches for other teams. There's just not media access to them. You only know word of mouth, what people say. So you got to do a little research to find out more about Jordi Fernandez. But the more research you do, you find out that this guy has not skipped any steps along the way. He has international experience. He has G League experience. He started as a film coordinator and player development coach, made his way all the way up to an assistant coach. He has head coaching experience in the G League with the Canadian national team and so forth, so on and so forth. So Jordi Fernandez really checks every box. And if you're looking at it from any hire in any job, I mean, he has the perfect resume. He has elite references, whether it's from Mike Brown or Mike Malone, who he's coached under, or players like Nikola Jokic, Domantas Sabonis. I mean, everyone speaks very highly of him. So from that standpoint, the Nets got a very qualified candidate. And then from here, you just got to see how it works. I mean, he's going to be a younger coach, 5th youngest in the league entering next season. And he has a chance to kind of create his own vision and his culture with the Nets. Whereas a hire like Mike Budenholzer, you know what you're getting with him. He's a veteran coach. He might be a little stuck in his ways. I did hear similar things prior to this announcement coming out in the days leading up and the tea leaves made me think that maybe the Nets wouldn't go in Bud's direction. The fact that he was a little difficult to work with, and that was part of his exit in Milwaukee. So that could have played a part here. I also know he had high contract demands, as Brian Lewis reported. I heard that he wanted something similar to Monty Williams at least, which was, I think it was $6 over $80 million. And coaching salaries are going up ever since Monty signed that. Steve Kerr signed for, I think, $17.5 million a year. Eric Spoelstra's at $15 million a year. So these contracts are going up for coaches, and Budenholzer would have been someone that the Nets would have had to kind of meet his demands. But aside from that, I'm not sure that they would have ultimately chosen Budenholzer over Fernandez. Like I said, I think Fernandez is a very qualified candidate, and he's someone the Nets are excited about.
Yeah, I heard Bud wanted over 10 years.
I'm not sure that was the case. I definitely over 10 million. 10 years, I'm not sure. That's unprecedented. So I don't know about that, how correct that is. But 10 years for any NBA coach, I mean, it's kind of a non-starter with the turnover it is in the league now.
You would agree, right? Yeah.
That's a college coach type of thing. And even 10 years for a college coach is tough to swallow. So I'm not sure it was 10 years. But if it was, definitely that's a non-starter.
I feel like, he's an older guy. The reason why he would ask for 10 years was because he said, you know what, I'm probably not going to last that long. It's kind of like my retirement fund. Well, listen, that's the only way I could think about that.
The negotiations, you could ask for whatever you want, but teams are not going to say yes when you're asking for 10 years. But just to be clear, I don't think that was the case. I know it was over 10 million, but not 10 years.
Interesting. So going back to the guy who did get the job, Jordi Fernandez. Man, what a story this guy has. He was going for a PhD. I believe he was like one paper short. He winds up being discovered by Mike Brown. He had a business at the time that was supposedly very successful. This guy takes a chance, winds up coming over, taking a job. I think it was like a player development job. Moves all the way up. And winds up going to Denver for a couple of years under Mike Malone, like you said. Goes to Sacramento. Well, what can we expect from him?
Yeah, I think he's a very well-rounded coach, and like I said, checks all the boxes. Number one, you mentioned his PhD, and I think it was sports science or sports
Yep,
psychology,
for
whatever it is.
psychology.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you already know he understands how the athlete's mind works, and that's an important thing for a coach. He relates to players very well, so that's step one, right? Yeah, and he said it himself. Relating to players is not all about being your friend. It's about being able to confront and be honest with players and still be able to make it through on the other side and having their trust and everything of that nature. So I think he checks that box. From an X's and O's standpoint, he's been a defensive coordinator of sorts for the Kings for the last couple of years, and he's gotten rave reviews. The Kings have not been an elite defensive team, but they don't have very good defensive personnel, and they play an incredibly high pace, which makes it difficult to defend. So I think they were 14th in the league in defensive rating this season, which is very good considering you have Sabonis at the 5, and he's not a rim protector. He's not mobile. Really, none of their personnel is high level defensively. And like I said, that he has head coaching experience. So he's been the man in charge of running an operation. He has EuroLeague and international experience, so he understands how the game works there, which is becoming more how the NBA is run nowadays. He's done it in the G League. He's seen the NBA. He's worked under Mike Malone and Mike Brown, who are two of the better coaches in the league and have around the league. They're respected as having two of the best offensive schemes in the league. So I think anything he picks up from them offensively will be important. I've watched some interviews of Fernandez in the past of how he wants to play. And it seems he wants to have speed. He wants to have versatility. He wants to have shooting, as every team does, and then playmaking, which is, he pointed to the Kings in that they have speed with De'Aaron Fox. They have playmaking with Sabonis. So I think that might be a vision for how he builds this team. Just got to see how it works out once he gets on the floor with this team and really gets a chance to build what he wants to build here in Brooklyn.
The coaching staff. Sean Marks has pretty much picked all of the coaching staffs for his head coaches, except for Jacques Vaughn this past year. A big tell to me to see how this is going to go is if Jordi actually gets to pick his own staff or if Sean Marks will get to pick the staff himself. Have you heard anything about that?
That's a little premature. I do think with any rookie head coach, it's usually collaborative between the front office and the coach because rookie head coaches have never built a staff before. The organization is going to help them do that. That's why you saw more of that with Steve Nash and so forth. So, but it's always collaborative. In terms of Jacques Vaughn, he had been a head coach prior. He'd been around the league in multiple stops, so he had some connections. He brought someone on like Jordi Fernandez, who he had in Orlando. So that's just how that works. I think it's going to be a collaborative approach by the Nets either way. Jordi will have his pick of guys that he's met through his stops throughout the league of who he would like to bring over. And Joe Tsai's always been willing to spend on coaching staffs to surround his head coach. So I think the Nets have a good shot of luring talent. And then Marks, I'm sure, will have his insight into guys that he thinks could surround Jordi to make his coaching staff as well-rounded as possible. So I think it will be collaborative.
Now I want to kind of transition into the offseason. Obviously, Jordi's coming in. What moves can we expect Sean Marks to kind of make for him? Looking at Denver, looking at Sacramento, they had great point guards. Do you see an upgrade at point guard possibly coming?
It's going to be tough this offseason. The Nets don't have a lot of flexibility. They have no real cap space. They have the mid-level exception. They have the biannual exception, but those are minor salaries, and you're not going to really get someone that's better than Schroeder. It would be someone at that level or worse. I think they will bring another point guard in, whether it's a lower target like a Chris Dunn or an Aaron Holiday. Like, these are some point guard names that could be cost-effective that they could bring into the mix. I think it's more of a 2025 plan for this team. And that, of course, could be expedited if someone like Donovan Mitchell asks out this summer, which, for the record, I would predict happens this summer. So that could expedite things. And I think they view Mitchell as that lead guard. He's played a lot of point with the Cavaliers when Darius Garland has been hurt. And that's actually where the Cavaliers have been best this season, when Mitchell was at the one. We saw it in the Paris games against the Nets. He was starting at the one along a few different wings, and Jared Allen in the middle, running a lot of high pick and roll with the ball in his hands. And that's where the Cavaliers were best. So I think ultimately Mitchell could be that guy for the Nets next year. But if not Mitchell, I think it's going to be a pretty similar looking roster for next year. And then 2025 will be the big swing.
Who could they be looking at in 2025 if not Mitchell?
Yeah, so I actually tweeted out a long list of the 2025 free agent class today. Broke it down into star free agents, restricted free agents, high-level elite role players, and then other players. So the way I look at it, I think Donovan Mitchell is the crown jewel for the Nets. Whether they get him via trade or they get him in free agency would be preferable, but I'm not sure the Cavaliers will let it hit that point. I think he's a guy who they see as someone that kind of 27, 28 years old, fits the timeline of having sustainable success of what Mark's talked about. I mean, if you add him at his age, you really have a 5-year window of sorts to really build the roster around him, which I don't think a lot of Nets fans understand when they say, oh, they're getting Donovan Mitchell. That's all that's going to do is make him a first or second round team. It's not going to have a championship ceiling. Yeah, immediately, sure. But if you get Donovan Mitchell, you continue to build the foundation of this team up. He's young enough that you would have a kind of a runway here to continue to be strategic, building out this team, making yourself more of a destination. And then whenever that true superstar asks out, also we get further and further away from the Houston deal, more the Nets picks are available to trade in the future. Then the Nets are going to have a ton of assets to deal with, and they could be a player for any star that comes available. So you get Mitchell now. He fits the timeline, wants to be here from New York, is a lead guard, which they need. And then from there, you just be strategic the next couple of years to see who comes available. And Brooklyn is an always enticing place for stars to play. So I think that's the Nets' plan. So they can get a guy like Mitchell. They're supposed to have about $80 million in cap space in 2025. If they get a guy like Mitchell, take 40 off of that, you'll still have about $40 million left. They can get 2 good players. They can get one really good player and maybe a lesser tier player. They can maybe go for another second tier star like a Brandon Ingram or a Lauri Markkanen. I'm not sure which path they take. I'm starting to warm up to the ideas of if they get Mitchell, maybe you don't go for that second star in free agency. Rather, you stay flexible, holding your assets and look for that star via trade, because the best players really get traded more often than hit free agency nowadays. And maybe you go after a guy like a Derek White in free agency. Get him for 30 million. Celtics have an expensive team. Derek White is a point of attack defender, a guard next to Donovan Mitchell, supposedly. Like, you could have Derek White, Donovan Mitchell, Bridges, Claxton, Clowney grows into something, and you still have some cap flexibility moving forward. You have a lot of your draft picks, and like I said, as we get further and further from the Houston deal, you have more of your picks going forward, and you still have picks left over from Phoenix or Dallas after getting Mitchell. I don't think it would tap them out completely. So I think that's kind of the idea here. And that's an exciting future if you could have a Derek White type with a Mitchell and a Bridges and Claxton, and you have a lot of good pieces around Mitchell, and you still be flexible for that ultimate star that would put you into championship contention.
Very interesting. You did not mention Cam Thomas whatsoever. The Cam Thomas stands are going to come after you now. You know that, right?
Well, I don't think Cam Thomas, as much as I like his game, I don't think he's part of the long-term plan if Donovan Mitchell is here. And I do think Donovan Mitchell in an ideal world is part of their long-term plan. I just don't see the two of them coexisting together. I don't like. Could they play them together temporarily? Sure. Donovan Mitchell on any team is going to make them better. I just don't think it's the ultimate best use of assets or team fit or team building to have the two of them together in the backcourt. And I don't think the Nets see it that way either. So whether it be in a trade for Donovan Mitchell or a trade in another way, in a 3-team trade or down the line in some way, I just don't see the two of them operating on the roster together.
That's exactly where I wanted you to take it.
Mm-hmm.
I would see in a possible deal for Donovan Mitchell, you probably have to trade a Cam Thomas. That would be one of the better assets. If you don't want to trade all your picks, that would be a way to kind of mitigate that, right?
Yeah, well, the difficult thing about Cam Thomas is that his value is very polarizing across the league. Like, you could ask 10 different people, 10 different executives across the league, what do they think about Cam Thomas? And they're all going to feel differently. You're going to have some guys that are going to think he's going to be a future all-star, which I think is a smaller group. You're going to have some that think he's destined to be a career 6-man. Then you have someone say, okay, maybe he's in between, but how does that work into a team scenario? Because if you got to think about how it works for good teams in the league. The best teams in the league have the best shot creators in the league, whether it's Luka, whether it's Shea, whether it's Steph, they're running their offense through these unbelievable talents. Even guys like Harden and Trae Young, historically, the last few years, they operate at an analytically super efficient level to stabilize an offense and kind of be the general for that offense, right? So all the best teams have these elite talents, and they want the ball in their hands as much as possible. So how does Cam Thomas fit on an elite team? And he's only 22, so you don't want to say that he can't get there, but is he going to be one of those guys long-term that you can run everything through at an elite level, which is what it takes for a championship team? So that's the question there. And if he's not that guy, he's just taking possessions away from that guy on a championship team. And then they view him as just a 6-man, which is kind of a role that's more and more obsolete in the NBA today. I've been higher on him than a lot of people from the beginning. But at this point, I'm not exactly sure he ends up as a star. And if he's not a star, his value, like I said, becomes very, very polarizing. So if they are looking at a trade for Donovan Mitchell or something else, I think you're going to have to find the team that values him. And the team that values him and the team that also has a fit for him, it's going to be a small group of teams. And that small group of teams is not going to necessarily have to give up a ton because they're only competing with one or two others for Cam Thomas. So that's where it gets tricky. I'm not sure exactly what his value would be. I think it's gone up since last year, certainly. A team I would look at, this is no sourcing, it's just my thoughts here. Maybe Charlotte has interest. Charlotte, they just got Jeff Peterson, Ryan Gisrael come from the Nets, part of the group that drafted him in Brooklyn. They know who he is. Younger team that can afford to pay him. LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams. They can kind of use a two-guard there. So I could see him being a fit there in a three-team deal, maybe sending back some assets or salary to the Nets and working in with the Cavaliers. But yeah, that's an interesting part. And if Thomas does have value, like you said, that's a big deal for the Nets because then they can hold back some extra picks and have more flexibility going forward.
Claxton.
Yeah, so Claxton, I think he'll be back. There's always a risk with unrestricted free agency. I think that we've seen anything from the Nets the last couple of years whenever they've dealt with unrestricted free agents, whether it was Claxton himself a couple of years ago, Cam Johnson last year, Joe Harris in the past. There's a risk in unrestricted free agency that a player walks. So I think as much as I don't see the market for Nick Claxton to get 20 to 25 million on the open market, I just don't see who's giving him that money. If the Nets play hardball with him and say, okay, get an offer and come back to us, they risk losing him. So what's worth it? Paying him an extra 2-3 million more or losing him? So I think that's kind of how they view it. So I think they're going to come out early in free agency, give him an offer 4 for 80, 5 for 100 off the bat, 20 million a year, and say, listen, we value a lot. Take this offer. I think he'll probably take that. If he doesn't and it goes around looking for the league, I think he'd ultimately come back to the Nets and realize that's the best offer he has. So I'd expect him back something in that $20 million range.
I need to bring this up. My guy Day, what happens to him?
Well, he has one more year on his rookie deal. I don't think he's going to get extended before that. Similar to Cam Thomas, he's a backup center. I think he could have a good career as a backup center. He's shown he can rebound. He had a much better year this year than last. I think towards the end of the year after his injury, he got phased out a little bit, dealing with injuries, and then Noah Clowney, they wanted to see more of him. That's just how it works. But I think next year the Nets could have a nice 3-big rotation with Claxton, Clowney, Sharp. They'll kind of bring different things. Sharp is the more prototypical drop big, rebounding big. Claxton is your versatile kind of shot blocking 5, rim roller, athletic, and then Clowney kind of has a little bit of a different dimension, being able to step out and shoot the 3. So I think that could be a nice rotation for the Nets. Maybe add a veteran guy in there in that mix as well to compete and protect yourselves. But I think Day'Ron Sharp's a good player, but he's going to be more of a backup 5. That's his ceiling long term. He doesn't really have scheme versatility beyond drop defense. But that's a good role for him. We've seen a guy like Andre Drummond for the Bulls this year kind of turn himself into a really good backup center in the second half of his career. I think that's something Day'Ron Sharp could do.
Clowney does great the last couple of games, obviously going off. Numbers look good. Kid is super young. He can't even buy a beer yet. Where do you see him going next year?
Really impressed with him this year. I mean, I liked his talent. We knew some of the things he could do, but for him to showcase it in his rookie season with the slight frame that he has, I mean, we saw a development in Nick Claxton. He wasn't doing this his rookie year, albeit he did get hurt and have shoulder surgery, but Claxton was showing flashes more at the end of year 2, and he never showed the skill flashes that Clowney is showing right here in his rookie year. And that shooting form, fluid, quick release. I mean, it looks like he doesn't have to strictly be a standstill shooter. We saw some moments where he would step back, find the line, and still go up and shoot. So I think his fluidity is outstanding for his size. His athleticism has surprised me. He's a better athlete than I thought. And then his aggression. I mean, for 19 years old, for being as skinny as he is, having a quiet, meek personality, I mean, he really attacks the rim strong. So can't say enough about how good he looked this season. His defensive versatility switching out, which I think will continue to get better, but he already shows good signs of that. His instincts around the rim, blocking the ball, rebounding the ball, which I think is his best NBA skill coming in. So Clowney's got a lot of versatility, and I think you just continue to grow with him. I think he could play at the 4, he could play at 5, and having a stretch big just unlocks everything for a team. I think it's one of the things, like for me personally, if I was building a team, I would want a big that could step out and shoot at the 5. I think it's such a huge advantage. You see it in Boston for years. They really only target bigs that stretch the floor, whether it's Porzingis or Al Horford. I mean, they had Robert Williams for a bit, but having that stretch 5 counter, teams can't double. It makes all your guards better. It makes all your perimeter players better because they're just playing one-on-one basketball all game. You drive, you kick. It's an easy, beautiful, free-flowing style of basketball. Whereas the Nets the last couple of years, we're watching Claxton in the paint all the time. Sometimes Simmons with him. Sharp can't shoot. So the Nets really haven't had a stretch big in a while. It's a hard archetype to find. So Clowney potentially could really be a useful piece going forward. And having him under contract, 3 more years, a rookie deal, he could be a real value if he turns out to be a regular contributor in the rotation moving forward.
Where does Sean Marks rank in the GMs in the league?
This is the worst question ever. I don't. How do you rank GMs? I'm gonna ask. Like, there's no way to quantify how good a GM is. Like, it should
say by record.
By record. I mean, that's
if
just
you say by record, by loss of assets. There's a way you can do it.
Do you realize how deep you have to look to rank every GM by their resume? The context of every move. We follow the Nets, so we know the context of all the Nets moves. But to follow every other team, you have to know the context of every single move, the thought process in that move, what they were considering and that they didn't do, and all this stuff. So we happen to have a familiarity with what goes on with the Nets, but not every team in the league. So listen, I think the threshold for coaches and the threshold for general managers is competence. I think that's what it is. I think as long as they are competent, you have a chance to win. It's very rare that a coach holds you back from winning a championship. The Nets, for as bad as Steve Nash was, the Nets were going to win the championship had they not gotten hurt, right? You could agree with me with that, right? So absolutely, for all the faults of Steve Nash, the Nets were going to overcome that still. But coaching matters. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but it doesn't matter as much as most people say. In terms of a general manager, I think Sean Marks has shown himself to be very good at points. He's shown himself to made some bad mistakes. A lot of the stuff that has been thrown his way, that where the mistakes have come, been out of his control, unpredictable. I don't know how many other GMs would be able to handle it in the right way, right? We know I don't need to relitigate the start of Marks' tenure. We could all agree up until KD and Kyrie, marvelous, right? Not a misstep, right? I don't know many, if any, other GM that could have took the Nets from the situation that they were in to where they ultimately got to. So great up to that point. Then we get to 2020, 2021, pulls off the James Harden trade. James Harden was unbelievable as a Net that first season. He was probably their best player, right?
You make that move 100 out of 100 times, and anyone tells you any different, they're fucking lying to you.
Okay, so we're at that point now,
yes,
right?
We're here. We're together on this.
We agree. You get to the playoffs. The Nets are the championship favorite. Okay, they probably win had at least one of Harden and Kyrie stayed healthy, right? I mean, we could all agree with that. That's not Marks' fault. Guys get hurt. That's really bad luck, you know? So we get to the next season, right? The Nets wanted to extend all 3 of those guys in the offseason. We got past COVID, and all of a sudden COVID restrictions come down. Are the Nets supposed to know that Kyrie Irving wouldn't get a vaccination? Is that Sean Marks' fault?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly. No. Not to mention, if you're in a different state, a lot of the other teams didn't deal with this. The Celtics supposedly had a couple of guys that were unvaccinated. They went to the finals that year because they didn't have to deal with the restrictions. Does that mean Brad Stevens is better than Sean Marks? He probably is for other reasons, but not because of what happened to the Nets there. Okay, so that's not the Nets' fault. Kyrie Irving being out, I will say this. I do think the Nets should have allowed Kyrie to play part-time from the start. I said it at the time. I got a lot of backlash from it, but I think it alienated him in a way from the start, and I think they could have lessened the load on KD and Harden from the start. But they chose to keep him away. I think it was a fair decision. I think it was the wrong decision. Who knows if it ultimately changed how things ended up. Okay, so then you get deeper into the season. KD and Harden, even despite Harden still coming back from that hamstring, not playing his best, he was still playing like an all-star, ultimately made the all-star team, and the Nets were the 1 seed for most of that season. Okay? Staying afloat. Ultimately, KD gets hurt again. Very unlucky. Harden's left out there with a part-time Kyrie, like Will Smith meme. He's in the room by himself. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's going on here? It's chaotic. Kyrie, we have no end in sight when Kyrie gets back. Kyrie was the domino that forced James Harden to ask out. They didn't have personal beef, but James Harden was looking out for his career, and he's like, listen, this is crazy. This is chaotic here. I got Kyrie playing part-time. I got to look out for my career here. So how is that Sean Marks' fault? They were asking Harden the entire time, Harden, do you want to stay? Yes, I want to stay. Yes, I want to stay. They offered him the extension. He didn't sign it. Okay. So that's what that was. I don't think it's not Sean Marks' fault that James Harden asks out because Kyrie Irving didn't get vaccinated. I'm not even going to blame Kyrie for not getting vaccinated. You know, like that's his choice. It is what it is. It is what
Yeah.
it is. That's his choice, But at the same time, that's not on Sean Marks. It's just an unlucky circumstance that the Nets had to deal with that only Golden State, LA, the Knicks, and the Clippers had to deal with as well because of the restrictions. So that's just unlucky. And a lot of that happened throughout the Nets tenure. So then Harden goes to the Sixers. Ben Simmons comes over. It's a good package, right? If Ben Simmons is Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons was
But
25.
time out. You're kind of glossing over a big part here. And I love that you're really passionate about this.
Yeah.
I think the news is it's known that he wasn't 100% healthy. And yes, I could go back and say, well, are you going to risk losing Harden for nothing? Especially what he was doing at the time. You saw that Sacramento game that he was just literally just flopping around the court, just turnover after turnover and whatever. I know he went on like a Vegas trip before that Denver game, just like stuff that you probably wouldn't want around your team if you're going for a championship, right?
Mhm.
So I can understand that, but where the first things come in is that you took Ben Simmons knowing that he wasn't healthy, and you knew that.
Let me get. I gotta get there. Okay.
Go ahead. I'll let you
I'm
do your
kind of
spiel.
skipping
Go ahead,
steps,
go for
but to this point, we could all agree that up until the time Harden asked out, Marks has done nothing wrong. He's done a good job. Right?
I think he could have done a better job rounding up the roster, but go ahead.
But listen, when you have 3 max players,
Absolutely hard.
Limited assets, I think he did pretty well. He found Bruce Brown, right? He added Jeff Green on a minimum before they ultimately lost him. Blake Griffin was a good ad when they added him. They had Claxton developing. So they did some good things. And it was enough to round out the roster if they had the big 3 healthy. And that was the plan. So at this point, any mistake Marks made, misstep that he made, is not anything grand. And it's something that every other team in the league makes a misstep here and there, minor missteps. So then you get to the point of the Sixer trade. They get not completely blindsided by it because I'm sure they had a feeling about it, but Harden was telling them he didn't want to leave. It comes to like 2 or 3 days before the deadline. They trade him to the Sixers. Didn't have a lot of leverage because Harden could walk in free agency, and the way he was acting was untenable. And you've seen Harden in the past in Houston. He will make things uncomfortable for you. So I don't think they really wanted to risk that. And at the time, you're getting Ben Simmons, who on paper was a perfect fit next to KD and Kyrie as a slasher, as a do-it-all defensive versatile piece, right? 25 years old with a resume that matches up to anyone at 25 years old, 3-time All-Star, all defense. Like the Nets needed defense. They needed size. He fit all of that. In terms of him being injured, he was holding out. Okay. He was holding out. It was a strategic holdout. I don't know how real the mental health stuff was, but even if it was real, it was a ploy to also get him to sit out. This was a battle deeper than the Sixers and Ben Simmons. It was the players union. It was Rich Paul. It was all of that. Okay. Either way, if a player is injured, as long as they're not ruled out for the season, I mean, everyone assumes they're going to get healthy. Ben Simmons didn't have anything that was at that point indicating he needed surgery. Okay. It was something, if you remember, when Ben Simmons came to the Nets, he was ramping up in practice. He hadn't played all year. They thought he was going to come back early. Then he suffered a setback, right? So that's what happened. He wasn't seriously injured at the time they acquired him. He was ramping up, got a setback. Then he was ramping up again before the playoffs. They thought he was going to return in game 4. And then they decided, okay, he had a setback again. He needs surgery. That was not known at the time of the trade. And if you're acquiring Simmons based on who he was, even if he was going to miss a month or 2 after the trade, you're fine. You're going into playoffs with Ben Simmons, KD, and Kyrie. You should be a title contender. So that was the issue there. I mean, the Nets did not trade for Ben Simmons knowing that he needed back surgery because he didn't need back surgery at the time of the trade. That came down later. So again, I think.
But they knew he wasn't 100% healthy, though.
But it wasn't a big deal. It was more of a ramp up. He wasn't seriously injured in any way. He was sitting out of the Sixers because he was holding out. He wasn't sitting out of the Sixers because he had a back injury. That was not ever the reason. He never cited he had a back injury sitting out of the Sixers. When the Nets acquired him, they didn't say he was injured and had a back injury. It was that he had to ramp up for the season because he never went through a training camp and he hadn't played all year. So that was not a thing. And people want to act like the Nets acquired damaged goods of a back injury at the time of that happened. That was not the case. And if you go on Nets Twitter at the time of the James Harden trade, when everyone hated James Harden, and I was actually one of the few that said, this is not a good day for the Nets. You're never trading James Harden, and it's a good day for the Nets. As high as I was on Ben Simmons, I was one of the few that said that, which a lot of people didn't like. You're acquiring Ben Simmons at that point where he's supposed to be a good player for you. Unfortunately, Ben Simmons is one of the most tragic stories in NBA history at this point. A player of his talent, his age, that just completely falls off the map to this point. I don't want to completely write him off, but it's not looking good for his career. So there's many cases of that in NBA history. The Nets are unlucky, again, to have that situation hit their way. So even still, you get to the playoffs that season. Joe Harris, again, $20 million player. Whatever people think about him, he had a bad series against the Bucks. He was a good player for the Nets for years. He was a core piece for them, key rotation player. He was out for the year that year. Again, unfortunate injury. So the Nets went into the playoffs with low seeding, again, because KD got hurt. Very unlucky. Kyrie was part-time, very unlucky. So they come into the playoffs as the 7th seed, and they have to play the Boston Celtics, who go on to the NBA Finals that year. And they are ready to go. They got bounced and embarrassed by the Nets the year before. They come back raring to go. The Nets are thin because they don't have Simmons. They don't have Harris. That's $60 million of their payroll right there. It's KD, Kyrie surrounded by a lot of guards. Series could have gone a couple different ways, right? First couple games really close. Tatum hits that buzzer beater layup. Maybe the series goes longer if they win that game. A lot of things change in the playoffs. Ultimately, it's a 4-game sweep. Claxton shoots like 3 of 21 from the free throw line. The margin of victory in the series was like 18. It was a closer series than the sweep. They lose, okay? It's fine. It's not always your year. Another bad luck year with injuries. Kyrie was out half the year with COVID. KD got hurt. Wasn't your year. You need a little luck to win a title, right? Again,
A lot of bad luck here, Billy.
But listen, we look back at this, whether it's COVID, injuries, or whatever, the Nets had some unprecedented bad luck. And that's just the reality of the situation. So then you go into the next season, KD, embarrassed, frustrated about the sweep. He wants a trade. I think a lot of the issue with the Nets is the fact that the personalities of the stars they had were very unpredictable, right? And KD loved being a Net. He said that since he left being the Nets, he didn't think he could win a title with the Nets because they had gotten swept. And he thought Ben Simmons was damaged goods at that point, coming off of back surgery. He didn't think that the Nets were going to be able to build this thing or turn this thing around to build a championship team. So he asks out, whatever, at that point. And then he calls for Marks and Nash's job, which more than anything was a leverage ploy. The Nets had not traded him for 2 months. It's his last-ditch effort before camp. He has said he did not want to miss training camp. And he wanted to make things uncomfortable for the Nets and say, listen, you can have me back, but you got to do this. So it was a last-ditch ploy. I don't think he thought Steve Nash was a good coach. I don't think Steve Nash was a good coach. But that was just a move to try and get moved because he ultimately didn't. He ultimately comes back. I think one of the best moves Joe Tsai has made in his tenure, and I haven't been the highest on Joe Tsai, was getting KD to come back and not giving in to KD there. Because if you give in to KD there, where does it end? The stars had already been running the show. You have to stand up at some point. And your organization becomes very chaotic if you don't. And you're looking for a whole new franchise leadership a month before training camp. So I think that was smart to do that. He gets them to come back. So the Nets come back then. I mean, it wasn't all water under the bridge. You knew something would come up again. But supposedly you're getting Ben Simmons back off of his first surgery, right? You get Joe Harris back. You get KD and Kyrie. They added Royce O'Neal, was a good 3-and-D wing. And the team was good. Even after a rough start, even after everything, Kyrie again brought drama into the situation. They fire Steve Nash. Jacques Vaughn takes over. And they look pretty good. They go on an 18-2 stretch. Simmons is playing. He's not looking like his old self, but he's playing well enough. That 5-man unit of Kyrie, KD, Royce, Simmons, and Claxton, I mean, they're playing really well. They're 18-2. They're on the fringe of the 1 seed. And then KD gets hurt again. I mean, I don't know, at that point, like, I don't know why Sean Mark gets so much blame. I get that stars ultimately get traded. But Kyrie, who in their right mind is giving Kyrie a full 4-year max? No one. That's why Kyrie didn't get a full 4-year max with the Mavericks. Okay? He overplayed his hand using KD as his friend to try and get more than he deserved. Okay? And he ultimately goes to the Dallas Mavericks, gets less than that. They're playing well. Good for Kyrie. I'm happy he got something that he likes, but you couldn't blame the Nets for not giving Kyrie everything he wanted. And at that point, with KD getting hurt for the 3rd consecutive year, missing over a month, the Nets falling back down in the standings because of that. They're middling. It's 6, 7 seed again, 5th seed, whatever the hell they were at that time. Like, the Nets said to themselves, we're getting hurt every year. KD's getting older. Kyrie's unreliable. We don't have Harden anymore. Simmons doesn't look great. We don't know what's going to happen there. He needs surgery to end the year again. This team probably isn't going to be able to get over that hump. So they said, listen, it was a choice. They hoped KD could stick around. They tried desperately with KD in the days before the deadline, before he ultimately got traded to the Suns, to try and find him a second star around the league. They looked really heavily into Siakam. Masai Ujiri wanted the sun and the moon. He wanted Claxton. He wanted Cam Thomas. He wanted every pick the Nets had, okay? They would not have been able to build a championship team around KD, Siakam, and no one else. So that's ultimately what it came down to. KD would have loved to stay. He loved Brooklyn. But ultimately, it was just that they couldn't figure it out, ask from an asset standpoint at that point, once Kyrie asked out, how to do it. And if we're being real with ourselves, the Nets realized, okay, KD is, 34 years old? This team doesn't look like it's better than Boston. We need a little bit more to get better than Boston. Knowing KD asked out the summer before, we know he's a flight risk again. Even if we sign Kyrie, if we get bounced the 1st or 2nd round, KD's probably asking out again. That's probably what was going to happen. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, but that's probably what was going to happen. And the Nets did not want to get stuck with Kyrie on a 4-year max, who was one more drama situation away from completely being untradeable. As it was, only 2 teams were interested in him, the Lakers and the Mavericks. Most teams already have a we're not touching Kyrie stance. So if he has one more situation like that, the Nets are really going to have a tough time moving a player with 4 years of max money left on his deal. And we've seen before, when KD goes out of the lineup, Kyrie kind of lets go of the rope. And the Nets did not feel comfortable with that. They realize the team is probably not a championship favorite at this point. And KD's getting older, so this is kind of inevitable in a way. So we're going to take the assets from Phoenix, get all their picks, all their future, Bridges and Johnson, and we're going to go from there. Is that the right move? I don't know, but I don't think it's a move that is I think it's a move that's defensible for sure. And I think if we break it down that way, we understand the context behind every move. We understand why it happened. A lot of things out of the control of Sean Marks and everyone else. Put another GM in that place. I don't know how they handle it. In retrospect, we can all say, this didn't work, so they probably should have done this just because it's the alternative. But if you're really breaking it down, would you have made a different choice in the moment? It's very difficult to say so. And even if you kept Kyrie and kept KD, and KD didn't ask out, which I think is wishful thinking, is that team winning a title? We see KD right now with Booker and Beal. They're 6th in the West, barely avoided the play-in. He's getting older. Kyrie and Luka, they look great, but they have Luka Doncic. So I don't know if this team was ever going to get over the hump. And I think the Nets realized that. And I'm not defending necessarily the choice they made, but it was definitely understandable. And if you look at it, any place where you think the Nets messed up along the way, you could point to COVID as being a domino, Kyrie being a domino, or injuries being a domino. And I think it put the Nets continually in difficult spot after difficult spot. And ultimately, when you're grading Sean Marks, it's not just about results. It's about process. Because if you're hiring anyone, if you're evaluating anyone, I think you want to look at who's the best candidate. Someone could cheat on an exam and have a 95 average. The result's great. But if you're really looking deeper in there, they cheat on that exam. And when they get in that job, you're going to see that they're not really a 95 student. So you want to look at the process over the results when it comes to GMs and front office executives, in my opinion, because going forward, it's going to be the process that leads to good decision-making. The results you can't guarantee. So that's how I view it. That's my thesis on Sean Marks there. It's probably the longest form I've ever given on it. So hope you appreciate it. But again, I'm not ranking GMs. I don't think you can rank GMs, but I think he's proven to be good at different steps along the way. Had some really awful luck, which every Nets fan loves to cite when they say, yeah, the Nets should have beaten the Bucks. The Nets had KD, Kyrie, Harden. But at the same time, then they blame Sean Marks for putting that same team together. So again, I don't get it. I think it's been very unfortunate luck that the Nets get the team of a lifetime during a once-in-a-generation pandemic. And to me, it's very simple in terms of that. I think if they had a more stable star instead of Kyrie, maybe it could have worked out. But again, Kyrie's how they got KD. So it's all looped in together, unfortunate circumstances. But I think going forward, Nets fans should have confidence in Sean Marks. He's proven he knows how to rebuild. And even though this is not a full-out rebuild, it's kind of a retool of sorts. He's proven he can lure star talent. And I think those are the two things that you're looking at for the Nets going forward. We'll see how the Jordi Fernandez hire works out. But ultimately, that's where the Nets stand. And an unfortunate couple of years, but I don't think Sean Marks gets a failing grade because of it.
I'd love to give you some pushback, but that was pretty comprehensive. So I'm going to let you cook on that. What is your favorite Nets jersey of all time?
Favorite Nets jersey of all time? You got me thinking now. I really love the Basquiats. I thought the Basquiats were cool. Remind me of the ones the last couple of years, because I do think the ones they've had the last couple of years are the top ones. I
Jersey also.
What do you say?
You can say anything from New Jersey also. That's an exception.
Yeah, I know. I don't think they're the best ones of all time. There's some nice ones.
Dr. J?
Dr. J's is clean. I'll agree with that. Dr. J's is clean, but that's more ABA. That's not Jersey necessarily. That's ABA. They brought him back in the end of the Jersey time. But yeah, Dr. J's are clean. I love the Basquiats. Black and white were both cool. I think I like the navy blue old NJ Nets one that they brought back a couple of years ago. That one was cool. I didn't like the light blue one. I didn't like that one. The Draws and Petrites. I don't think that really stood out well. I think the classic black is great. I think like Jay-Z hit it out of the park with that. I think the color scheme is fantastic. Yeah, but that's one thing the Nets have. The Nets have some good jerseys. They used to have a great court. I don't like the court. I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen it.
come on.
I hate the
It's such a
gray
beautiful
court.
court.
I hate the gray court.
Oh,
I think back when they
horrible.
first came to Brooklyn, that court was beautiful. It was unique. You know,
Is
I
it
hate
unique? Is it way more unique? What are you
no,
talking
it's too
about?
bland. It's too bland. It doesn't show.
Oh, you're
It
too
doesn't show
bland.
well on TV. I don't like it. You know what it is? It is. The Nets right now are so boring. It's so bleak. They need a little color involved. They need
Okay,
something that
okay.
stands out. So honestly, the way the last few years have gone, they got to change the court anyway. Just change the vibes. But I love that old court. I thought it was so cool. The herringbone pattern, a little darker court. I really like that court. But listen, if I could change 3 things with the Nets, that would be in the top 3 right there. Change the court.
Are you a Swamp Dragons guy? Very important question.
No.
Oh,
Swamp Dragons guy or a mascot guy. Corny. Listen, I like the sleek black and white, cool look. Jay-Z had the right idea. I don't go for that corny stuff. I don't know. The mascots I don't like. I don't like Swamp Dragons. Listen, the Nets, after the season they just had, putting a Swamp Dragon jersey on them would make them look like they're relegated to the G League. Like we need to keep things a little classier here in Brooklyn, a little better looking, a little more sophisticated. Swamp Dragons, listen, you can't do that at this point.
all right, Billy. Let's get some plugs out for you.
You can just follow me on Twitter at Billy Rienhardt. Love to converse with all of you on there, and gonna be hopefully a busy offseason for Nets fans. I know everyone would like to see this team change up a little bit, so we'll see what happens.
Thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to watch. Follow me at NetFansYouKnow on Twitter. If you like the podcast, subscribe. Have a great day. Have a great night. And we got a lot to discuss in the next 2 episodes. I'm out.